Just to give a little background about why Gen Z. So a little bit about my background. I was actually a project manager for Walt Disney Imagineering. So I lived in China to help open Shanghai Disneyland. So I lived in China for about 1.5 years with my family as an expat. Before I left, I was teaching at Cal State LA. I teach in the business department there. And when I came back, about 2016, I noticed the students were a little bit different. I wrote my dissertation on millennials and work environment preferences, and I noticed that just some minor differences. So then I said, oh, I think Gen Z is here. Bless you.
Thank you.
So that's just a little bit of background so I'm actually working on writing a book of what Gen Z wants at work, how to recruit them and how to retain them. I have a mailing list over there if you're interested in finding out when the book comes out. So yeah, he's got it right there. And then I have just a one-page cheat sheet on your tables about my presentation. So what defines a generation? Well, it's a society-wide peer group born over a period of roughly the same length as a passage from youth to adulthood, roughly around 20 to 21 years, who collectively possess a common persona. So if you're doing the math, there's all these different timelines of when millennials and Gen X and boomers are. But we're starting to see with the advent, with technology spreading so rapidly, that Gen Z came a lot quicker. So roughly 15 years. So let's, if you're comfortable, let's start raising some hands and see who we have in the room. So the great generation, age 76 and up. Show of hands? No? None. Well, they communicate in a chain of command style that value family, patriotism, and are self-sacrificing employees. What about boomers? Show of hands. All right, we got a good share of boomers. They enjoy communicating with face-to-face feedback, right? They prefer promotions in the form of raises and titles, etc. They like mentoring, which is very big in that generation. Anybody feel like that's accurate?
Sure.
Yes? Okay. What about Gen X?
Woo! It does.
All right, the one that everyone forgets about. Because you have baby boomers and millennials. Yeah, I know, but you will be taking over the world very soon, right? Once the baby boomers retire. With style, yes. So they're independent, task-oriented, direct, autonomous, and skeptical of authority, the latchkey kids, right? Is that accurate?
Pretty much.
Yeah? Okay. These are generalizations, of course. And then millennials. Any millennials?
Oh, one good.
No millennials? Okay, I'll raise my hand. So everyone keeps talking about millennials, right? Even millennials don't like millennials, right? But we're past that. But let me just give a little description. They're upbeat, team-oriented, close to the parents. Who has millennial kids? Show of hands. Yeah. So they're roughly 24 to 36 years old right now.
Do they still live at home?
They still live at home. If you're in LA, you're considered low income if you make less than $80,000 a year, right? So yeah, they still live at home, and they're confident about their future. They want to be the executive right out of college, right? Yeah. So then you have Gen Z. So they're actually very hyper-custom. They grew up during the recession. They're realistic, and they're plugged into technology. So they're 5 to 23. Hyper-custom means that they want exactly how his daughter got into that school. You get the balloons and you get the calls. They want everything tailored specifically to them, because that's what social media does for us, right? And we have filters on everything. So research is still underway for this generation. So the study that I'm doing, was that?
So there's still time.
They just entered the workplace last year. Just the first round. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a study of actual Gen Z people who have worked, that are currently working, or have done an actual internship, to find out how companies can recruit and retain them. So here's the technology. Has anybody seen this graph before? It's a technology explosion. So you see all the different inventions within the past hundreds of years, right? So then you look at right here, birth of Gen Z. 1995. You have YouTube, Facebook, Google, all these things happened while they were growing up. iPhone, iPad, self-driving cars, cell phones, DVDs, etc. The internet. So look at that. It's almost vertical, right? So you think that's going to influence a generation? Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, so here's some Gen Z stats. Who knows what FOMO is? Anybody?
Fear of missing out.
So what is it?
Fear of missing out.
It's on there.
Yeah, it says that.
Yeah. So what was it with your daughter, right? She's always on her phone, making sure that she's up to date. Yeah. There was a study that Old Navy did where they said no smartphones on the sales floor, and then all the Gen Zs felt like they were lackadaisical, like they just didn't know completely what to do. So they gave them back. And just the fact that they had them in the pocket made them feel better.
It's kind of like they're blanking.
Kind of, sure.
Just like Alex has to have it in his hand.
So, and this is a funny one. One study found that 1 in every 5 Gen Zers spend more time refreshing their Twitter feed than actually reading it. Another one admitted to having their smartphone in bed while they sleep.
That's pretty dumb.
Anybody have any kids that do that? Show hands. Any kids that do that? Yeah.
I have a
I
wife.
do. Just kidding.
So it's not only Gen Z, right? Gen X. So Gen X are the parents, right? So typically Gen X are the parents of Gen Z. So you see some similarities, just like baby boomers and millennials. Attention span, less than that of a goldfish. Less than 9 seconds. So get to the point when you're talking to them. They're realistic. They grew up during the recession, right? So they know that they're not going to be an executive right out of college, and they're going to have to work really hard. So they're a lot more serious generation than millennials. 79% of them favor integrating education programs with practical experience, such as internships, right? So not just teaching them the typical textbook, actually teaching them work experience. I know a lot of students, and anybody, we have a lot of education people in the room. There's a lot of internships with high schools now, right? I remember I went to CV a long time ago, and so I went to CV a long time ago. I don't remember any internships or anything like that. So they're trying to get people ready, because when you apply for a job when you graduate college, you need 5 years of work experience. You're like, well, you're doing the math, right? Doesn't really make sense. So they're trying to get as ready as much as possible. And then they're growing up slower. Does anybody think that that's accurate? So they're growing up 3 years slower than prior generations. They're getting the driver's license less. They're going out less. They're drinking. That's a good thing. They're drinking less. They're not getting in relationships as much. So if you look here at the statistic, driver's license ownership decreased 13% from 1998 to 2014. When I turned 15, I got my permit. When I turned 16, I got my driver's license, and I couldn't wait to go. But this generation is staying here a lot longer. 18 is like the median of when people are getting a driver's license. Yeah.
Well, we're seeing in the insurance industry, the parents prefer to drive the kids around to ballet, soccer practice, piano lessons, whatever. So, the soccer moms, why get a license when my parents can drive me everywhere?
Yeah. That's a very good point.
Driverless cars, they're ready.
Uber too, but that costs money, right? Driverless cars. What was that?
My employee, she's a Gen Z. She takes Uber to work every day because she just doesn't want to get a driver's license.
Interesting. Unheard of, right? From previous gen,
Yes.
even millennial. I couldn't wait to get my own car and drive and go hang out with my buddies, right? So here's some more. What about side gigs? Does anybody know what a side gig is?
Yeah.
What's a side gig?
Something you do. You drive Uber in addition to your regular job.
Something to pay off your student loans. Yeah. So there's a study by Santor that found that by 2020, over 40% of the U.S. economy will be side gigs or freelancers, right? So Gen Z is all about the side gigs. My study found that the majority of them plan to have a side gig or have one currently. And then 37% of adults under 30 have student loan debt with a median of $25,000. And then for the first time in 2010, they passed credit cards as the highest amount of debt in the country. So they're coming out with a lot more debt now. YouTube. They love YouTube. There's a 6-year-old kid that makes $1 million a month in advertising revenue. You know what I'm talking about? Of reviewing toys.
Yeah.
So they figure out, it's DIY, right? Do it yourself. They figure out, they use YouTube for almost everything. And I try to teach my students saying, hey, not everything is, you have to do some research on, is it legitimate sources, right? But YouTube is, and I do use it myself. If I'm like smoking a turkey, I go on YouTube to figure it out, right? Interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills aren't the same as we've seen, right? So being behind a smartphone for the whole teenage years has created a challenge for interpersonal skills on how to deal with face-to-face communication. You saying yeah? Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes?
Do they measure social media skills at all? I think they're off the charts on that.
They are off the charts on social media skills, but the problem is when you go into a workplace, what do you have to do?
Both.
You have to talk. You could IM a lot. So as as managing this new generation,
Yeah.
you have to learn how to adapt to them. But it's a two-way street, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But yes.
I would just say that there is hope. My grandson came out 2 years ago in the summer and spent 2 weeks with us. And I bet we didn't have 5 conversations. We talked intermittently, but conversations, and it was forced pretty much by me. However, I just had a long conversation with him on the phone. And I talked to his dad, and he says, I can't believe it. All of a sudden, he's down with the family, he's doing his homework in the kitchen, and he's talking. Maybe he got introduced to girls. I don't know.
Has anybody seen that Simon Sinek video on millennials?
No.
Okay, you should definitely watch it because he talks about now, you don't even need as much social skills in dating, just swipe right. It's an interesting perspective. They have sometimes a harder time dealing with opposing views, right? So you hear all these stories on campus of safe zones and not letting speakers come from another opposition side, right? So there's a book called iGen. I have the source listed on there. They talk about a lot about that, on seeing people's other points of view rather than just filtering it out, right? And then the more independent, then team-oriented. They'd rather do things themselves. And my study is finding this, that because millennials, they all want to be collaborative and work together. Gen Z's not so much. They'd rather do it themselves. So you're going to see a lot of friction there once the millennials are managing Gen Z. What do you mean you don't want to collaborate? Oops. And then depression and anxiety. So Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, they all make life look better than it really is, which can cause depression. So since 2012, the adoption of the smartphone, widespread adoption of the smartphone, depression and anxiety have been steadily increasing on college campuses by 5 to 8%. Is anybody from the education people, do you agree? Or? Yeah. Just said the student loans? Okay, hold on. I got a video here for you guys. Try to illustrate this point. Is the internet a little
Slow here.
sorry.
Let it catch up, it's
Let
okay.
it load for a second.
Okay. Who's on Instagram? Show of hands. Snapchat? Facebook? Yeah, I think everyone's on
Because I'm a
Facebook.
Gen Z, so. I
Huh?
got it.
You have a Gen Z?
Tinder? Tinder, whatever.
Tinglers is something different.
Just Judith now?
I'm not that. I'm just
Sorry,
single
guys.
folks.
How about Folsom?
The schools that both of my girls are at, they've recently both had suicides committed on campus.
Committed on campus.
Like, non-millennials and males. So speaking to the depression.
Yeah, and this video is going to kind of show you. So if I'll read out the messages if you're not able to see. It's a little. Woke up like this. That's a hashtag. km bike ride, but he wasn't riding a bike. Getting organized. Healthy breakfast, new me. Toss. Effortless selfie. Love spending quality time with these guys. Big night ahead. Relationship goals. So, does that give you a better idea?
Yep.
Right? So, does anybody, any comments on that?
Gen Z are marketing geniuses.
Yeah. There you
Hold
go.
on, hold on.
Show
Marketing.
Stop.
the 20 minutes.
That's all they do is market
Show the
themselves.
20 minutes it takes to take that perfect Instagram
Yeah,
picture.
and we're not exactly, or 2 hours, right? In one of the books that talks about Gen Z, they're saying that an Instagram model takes you 2 or 3 hours to get that perfect picture. That's
I saw
not
that
that's not
in
real
real
life.
life. Just these
Yeah.
girls trying to take a blog post for Instagram. They were like, hold the glass 2 inches higher, hold it up, and literally took them 20 minutes to take a picture of 2 champagne glasses. Picture was amazing once they were done, but it took them 20 minutes to take the
Just
one.
think of all that time for
Artwork
productivity.
of cinematography.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But everything on the internet's real.
Oh yeah.
Abe Lincoln said so.
I saw it the YouTube video of him saying it.
So I work with a group of at-risk teens,
Uh huh.
and I know you haven't gotten to the slide yet, but I gave them one of the articles from UCSD about how even having a smartphone out on your desk
Oh, I got it right
distracts
here.
you,
I got it right here. Yeah.
And so then we had a conversation about it, and it was really super interesting because they all agree that all this is true, but always everyone in the room like, oh yeah, I think that's true, but not for me.
Yeah. Everyone else, it's a friend, right?
Yeah. No, but I can totally, it doesn't matter if my phone's right there. I'm not distracted by it, but I think anybody else would be.
Yeah.
It was, okay.
The study, yeah. I'll go into that right now, right? So they found the mere presence of a smartphone on your desk would actually create a brain drain. It reduces your cognitive ability, right? And I think what's happened is, and I was in China, right? So I came back, I'm like, what's going on? What's a Snapchat, right? I missed the whole Snapchat phase, right? But I come back and everyone's so plugged into technology and it's really consumed our life. And I'll get into it a little bit. What we could do is do a digital detox. So I've actually had, that's part of my study is how many people have done a digital detox and for how long. So I've seen a month. Almost everyone, all the Gen Zs I've surveyed have done some type of digital detox or social media detox, where they unplug from social media and they feel like they're whole again. But let me go back to this a little bit. The reason why it's caused a lot of depression and anxiety as well is another one, right? It's caused a lot of anxiety is it creates lack of sleep, body image, fear of missing out, and bullying. You know, back when, before social media, when you get bullied, it was mainly at school or, you know, maybe after school, but not 24/7 where everyone could see it on display. So it's a big problem we're having with this, and I'm glad you're saying, you know, that's a great example.
Well, they all share passwords. Right?
Yeah.
So a bunch of these kids have been bullied online, and it was because they shared their passwords, so someone can set up a fake like Instagram account in their name and use that to bully them. And
What I'm trying to show you is when you get Gen Zs in the workplace, you're trying to create empathy so you understand what they're going through. Because before I saw this, I saw the Simon Sinek video when I got back from China. I'm like, there's no way. It's just ridiculous, right? And then I showed it to one of my classes, and they're like, everyone got quiet. I'm like, oh, I guess Gen Z's here. So the impact of technology. This is funny. This is just a kind of a goofy study, right? But one study found that 40% of Gen Zers preferred to have Wi-Fi over a working restroom. Another study found, and I don't know if you read this on the New York Times article, some of the educators in here probably did, that they found that laptops are less effective in the classroom than just writing down on pen and paper, because it reduces the being able to think about it, right? And that's same within conference rooms too. Everyone's on a laptop, but you're just typing it. Your brain's not getting a chance to process. When you write it down, that's the opportunity it gets. Yes.
There are some companies that when they have company-wide meetings or departmental meetings, they've started to not allow smartphones or iPads or laptops or anything into the meeting, so that people actually have to pay attention and take notes by hand.
Yeah. And some of them have, like, you can actually buy like boxes, right? Where it says like unplug and everyone puts a smartphone. How about a family get together? Maybe you do that too. When I have dinner with my family, take off the Apple Watch, put the iPhone, put on the island, and we just unplug during dinner time or family time. But we don't, everything accelerated so fast, we kind of just don't get a chance to look up and say, oh, we need to really kind of take a chance to pause, right? And then another study found that participants spent an average of 47% of the time online procrastinating. Who's done that before? I think you go online for something, and then all of a sudden you go down this rabbit hole, and it's like an hour's gone. You're like, what happened, right? So being able to unplug, technology is a great thing as a tool, but it's not good when it controls us, right? And then generational conflict zone. These are the top 5 things that really cause a lot of generational friction, right? Work hours. What time does a millennial come in?
Whenever they want.
I even had my MBA students last night joking about this. When a millennial comes in at 10:30 a.m., they need to make sure they get their breakfast through drive-through, and it has to be farm to table.
Yes.
But yeah, work hours is a big conflict, right? Because some people, we grew up working 9 to 6 or whatever like that. But some millennials, they're used to the college. Now it's Gen Z. They're used to working a little bit later into the night, right? But that's another one is chain of command. So who's had a millennial or someone younger go over their head before? Nobody? Yeah, one? Okay. Yeah. Side gigs, like we talked about that already. Work-life balance. So just to let you know, Gen Z also wants work-life balance. I have a question in my study saying how many hours a week would you work to get ahead, to move up the corporate ladder? There's like 50 at most.
Do you have a number for what it was with millennials?
No, this is Gen Z, but yeah.
Because with millennials, it was the opposite. They're like killing themselves.
Yeah. Well, and then, yeah. Well, we talk more about that offline. Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, millennials do work a lot because I'm also writing. I'm doing another study on millennial leaders. So I'm interviewing over 100 millennial leaders that are management or above, and a lot of them talk about how work is part of their life. So they go in, they'll maybe leave at 4, but then they'll go home or go to Pilates or whatever, right? And then they'll go and work another 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes till 2 in the morning. So they find that just being part of their life. But Gen Z, actually, they want to work the regular 9 to 5 from my study so far. And then micromanager or leader. So they don't want to be micromanaged either. They want a coach and a mentor. I mean, but this is human nature. Who likes to be micromanaged? Show hands. No, right? That's across all generations. Millennials just complain about it more, right? So tips to increase Gen Z engagement, manage the tasks, not the clock, right? Just make sure you're very specific on your tasks and keep metrics. By the way, they want more feedback than millennials do. We're seeing 1 to 5 times a week. Millennials wanted it once every couple of weeks, right? So they want to touch base just for 5 minutes. And they prefer face-to-face, ironically, when it's about important stuff. I notice I'm having a lot more students come into my office hours. Never before I had like 1 a semester. Now I have a line usually every week. So I notice a lot more face-to-face when it's about important stuff. Work-life balance, that's important. Leadership style. So remember, one leadership style doesn't fit all. So, you know, and it's not all for the same for all Gen Zs or millennials. So knowing your employees, and this is just common sense, right? Authenticity and integrity is very important to them, of their leaders. So if you are authentic and you have integrity, show it, talk about it, right? And this is great because for the Rotary Club, I think everyone in here does, 'cause that's what you're all about. Which makes you a great organization. And then diversity and inclusion is, well, something. Just kidding.
I like him.
Oh, yeah. And then diversity and inclusion is very important as well, right? And so we found from our survey that the majority of them, you know, wants to work for a company. That would attract them to work for a company, was talking about diversity and inclusion. Okay? And then you have a nice handshake at the top. So recommendations for all generations. How about you listen, right? From both sides. It's a two-way street. You know, you can't just completely adapt to them. They need to adapt to you too. Give them a chance to lead a small project. Opportunities for growth. So remember we talked about side gigs. So maybe they're an accountant, but they also like taking pictures, or they're a photographer. Let them do your company newsletter. Do a little side gig internally. So you're activating a different part of the brain. Empathy. So putting yourself in your coworkers' shoes. How do they feel? I was just trying to create empathy for Gen Z, but